The ship was dead when they found it. Commander Marcus Cole stood at the viewport of his salvage vessel and watched the wreckage drift through the blackness of space like a wounded animal that had finally stopped breathing. The Dragon King colony ship had been beautiful once. He could tell that much from the elegant curves of its hull and the intricate scale patterns carved into its metal skin. But now it was nothing more than a tomb floating in the Vega Corridor Harrow Syndicate work. His engineer Yuki said from behind him, her voice tight with anger she was trying to control. I recognize their plasma signatures anywhere. Marcus nodded slowly, his jaw tight beneath his gray-streaked beard. And he knew exactly what they would find inside. Because the Syndicate never left survivors, especially not when it came to Dragonkin, whose scales and flame glands fetched fortunes on the black market. We go in, he said. His pilot Dremek turned all four of his arms in a gesture that among the Kovati meant deep concern. And his large dark eyes blinked twice before he spoke. Commander, the Syndicate may return to check their work, and we are one ship against their fleet. We go in, Marcus repeated. And that was the end of the discussion. The airlock of the colony ship groaned when they forced it open, and the smell hit them immediately. That terrible mix of smoke and something else that Marcus had learned to recognize across 20 years of salvage work. Something he never got used to no matter how many times he encountered it. They moved through the corridors in silence, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. And everywhere they looked, they saw evidence of the massacre that had taken place here. Adult Dragonkin lay where they had fallen, their bodies twisted in poses of defiance. And Marcus noticed that every single one of them faced outward toward the direction of the attack. Because they had been protecting something. The incubation bay, Yuki whispered. And Marcus felt his stomach drop. They found it at the heart of the ship. A massive chamber that had once held hundreds of pods, designed to nurture dragonkin eggs through their final stages of development. But now it was a graveyard of shattered glass and broken dreams. Marcus walked among the destroyed pods and felt something break inside him with each step he took. Because these had been children, not yet born, and someone had murdered them all before they ever had a chance to see the stars their parents had traveled so far to show them. Commander, Dremek called from across the chamber. His voice strange. Marcus made his way through the debris until he reached his pilot. And then he stopped breathing for a moment. One pod remained intact. It was wedged beneath a fallen support beam, hidden from view unless you were standing in exactly the right spot. And through its glass surface, Marcus could see movement. Two hatchlings, barely the size of house cats, huddled together inside, and their scales shimmered even in the dim light of his flashlight. One a deep violet like the space between stars, and the other a warm ember gold like a sunset on old Earth. They survived. Yuki breathed. Coming up beside them, the violet one noticed them first, and her tiny body pressed protectively over her brother, her wings spreading as much as the confined space would allow. And she let out a high chirping sound that was clearly meant to be a warning, but came out more like a plea. Marcus knelt down slowly, making himself as small as possible, and the gold one lifted his head, and their eyes met through the glass. Those eyes were ancient and knowing, despite belonging to a creature that could not have been more than a few days old. And they held a question that Marcus understood without words. Are you going to hurt us too? We should leave them, Dremek said quietly. And Marcus could hear the pain in his friend's voice. Because Dremek was not cruel, he was practical. Dragonkin are difficult to raise, and their biology is beyond our understanding. And the Syndicate will hunt anyone who takes them. And we are not equipped for this. Everything Dremek said was true. Marcus knew it was true. He also knew that if he walked away from this pod, he would never be able to look at himself in a mirror again. Help me move this beam, he said. Yuki was already at his side. And together the three of them lifted the heavy metal off the pod. and Marcus placed his hands on the release mechanism. "Commander." Drumek tried one more time. "I know," Marcus said. And he opened the pod. The hatchlings tumbled out in a tangle of wings and tails and confused chirping. And they were so small, so fragile, and they had just lost everything they had ever known. The violet one recovered first, and she scrambled across the floor until she reached Marcus. And then she did something that would change the course of galactic history. Though none of them knew it at the time, she tugged at his coat. Her tiny claws caught in the fabric of his worn salvage jacket. And she pulled, and the sound she made was no longer a warning but something else entirely. Something that needed no translation across any species barrier. "Help us," she was saying. "Please help us." Her brother reached Marcus a moment later and pressed against his leg. Trembling so hard that Marcus could feel it through his boots, Marcus Cole had seen a lot of terrible things in his life. And he had done some things he was not proud of. And he had told himself many times that the galaxy was too broken to fix. But in that moment, with two orphan dragonkin hatchlings clinging to him like he was the only solid thing left in their shattered world, he made a decision. He picked them up. They were warm against his chest, warmer than he expected, and they curled into him immediately. And the violet one tucked her head under his chin, while the gold one wrapped his tail around Marcus's arm. "We are keeping them," Marcus said. Yuki smiled despite the horror around them. And Drumek made a sound that might have been a sigh or might have been a prayer. "The syndicate will come for us," Drumek said. "Let them come," Marcus replied. He looked down at the hatchlings in his arms, at the two tiny lives that trusted him completely, even though he was a stranger, even though he was not even the same species. And he felt something shift in his chest. "Let them come," he said again. "And we will show them what happens when you give humans something to protect." They walked back to their ship, carrying the last survivors of the Ember Clutch bloodline. And behind them, the dead colony vessel continued its slow drift through the darkness. A monument to cruelty that would not go unanswered. Marcus did not know it yet. But the galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They had a habit of adopting the broken things, and they would burn down empires for them. The first week was the hardest. Marcus had no idea what he was doing, and neither did anyone else on the ship. Because dragonkin were mysterious even to those species that had studied them for centuries. And here he was trying to keep two infant ones alive with nothing but guesswork and stubbornness. The violet hatchling refused to eat for the first 3 days. She would push away every food source they offered her and curl into a tight ball with her wings wrapped around herself. And Marcus could see her getting weaker with each passing hour. And fear began to creep into his heart. "She is mourning," Drumek said on the 3rd night, when Marcus sat in the cargo bay with the hatchling in his lap, trying desperately to get her to accept a nutrient paste that their medical database suggested might be compatible with her biology. "She is starving herself to death," Marcus replied, and his voice cracked on the words. Dreamac settled his large body on the floor next to them, moving slowly so as not to startle the little creature, and he was quiet for a long moment before he spoke again. "On my world, when the Civil War ended and so many of us had lost everything, the children stopped eating too. And we did not understand why until a healer told us something important." Marcus looked at his friend and waited. "They were not refusing food," Drumek said. "They were refusing to live in a world that had taken so much from them. And the only cure was to show them that there was still something worth living for." That night Marcus did not sleep. Instead he held the violet hatchling against his chest and talked to her, hour after hour, telling her about Earth and its blue oceans and green forests, about his childhood in a small town where the stars seemed close enough to touch, about the first time he saw a shipwreck atmosphere and knew that he wanted to spend his life among those distant lights. He told her about loss too, about his sister who died when he was young, about the friends he had buried over the years, about the weight of grief and how it never really went away, but how you learned to carry it. "I know it hurts," he whispered to her as the ship hummed around them. "I know everything hurts right now and you want it to stop, but I need you to stay, little one. I need you to stay because your brother needs you, and this broken old man needs you, and the galaxy needs you, even if it does not know it yet." Somewhere in the long hours before dawn, the violet hatchling lifted her head and looked at him, and her eyes were wet with something that might have been tears. Then she opened her mouth. Marcus grabbed a nutrient paste so fast he nearly dropped it, and he held it out to her with trembling hands. And she ate. Yuki found them in the morning, Marcus asleep on the cargo bay floor with both hatchlings curled on his chest. And she took a picture that would later become famous across dozens of worlds. "I'm going to call her Lyra," Marcus said when he woke, looking down at the violet hatchling who was now chirping softly in her sleep, like the constellation, because she found her way through the dark. "And the boy?" Yuki asked. Marcus looked at the gold one, who had woken and was watching him with those ancient knowing eyes. "Kale," he said, though he did not know where the name came from. "His name is Kale." The weeks that followed were a blur of learning and adjustment, and small victories that felt enormous. Dragonkin hatchlings needed temperatures that would make most humans uncomfortable. So Marcus converted his own quarters into a heated nest and slept in the common area. They needed minerals that were technically toxic to human biology. So Yuki spent hours at each port they visited tracking down the right supplements. They needed emotional bonding, which meant someone had to be with them constantly, which meant the entire crew took shifts. Dramak discovered that Kale loved watching the stars through the viewport, and he began carrying the little gold dragon on his shoulder during his pilot shifts, pointing out constellations and telling stories about each one. Yuki found that Lyra calmed down when she heard old Earth lullabies. So she dug through the ship's music archives and created a playlist that she played softly in the cargo bay every night. Marcus did everything else, and he did it badly at first, but he kept trying. And that was what mattered. The twins grew stronger every day. They learned to recognize each member of the crew and had different chirps for each of them. And Lyra in particular seemed to understand far more than any of them expected, tilting her head when Marcus spoke as if she was memorizing every word. But the galaxy outside their small ship was not kind, and word traveled fast through the dark channels where the Syndicate had eyes. A human crew had live dragonkin hatchlings, not just any hatchlings, but the last survivors of the Ember Clutch, one of the oldest and most respected dragon houses in the galaxy. The bounty on their heads grew every day. They were attacked for the first time at a fueling station in the Corinth sector. 3 Syndicate fighters dropping out of hyperspace with weapons hot. And Marcus threw himself over the twins while Dramak flew like his 4 hands were possessed by spirits of wind and fire. They escaped. Barely. The second attack came 2 weeks later, and the third came a week after that. And by the time they reached the edge of human-controlled space, they had been hit 7 times, and their ship was held together by hope and emergency patches. "We cannot keep running," Yuki said after the 7th attack, as she welded a hull breach closed with hands that would not stop shaking. "They have too many ships and too many spies, and they want those children too badly." Marcus knew she was right. He also knew that giving up was not an option. On the night before they reached Way Station Theta 7, he made a decision that would change everything. He sat down at the communications console with Lyra in his lap and Kale perched on his shoulder, and he recorded a message, and then he broadcast it on every channel he could reach. "My name is Marcus Cole," he said into the recorder. "I am a human salvage operator, and I am carrying 2 dragonkin hatchlings who are the last survivors of a Syndicate massacre, and I am putting the galaxy on notice." He paused and looked at the twins, and Lyra chirped softly as if she understood the weight of the moment. "These children are under human protection," Marcus continued. I do not care how many ships you send. I do not care how big your fleet is. I do not care what the bounty says. Because anyone who tries to take them from us will discover what it means to threaten something a human has decided to love." He ended the recording and sent it. Then he sat back and waited for the universe to respond. He did not have to wait long. The message spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours it had reached every corner of the civilized galaxy. And beings of every species were watching and sharing and arguing about the human who had declared war on the most feared slaving syndicate in known space. Some called him a fool, others called him a dead man walking, but many, far more than anyone expected, called him something else entirely. They called him brave on the bridge of a battered freighter 3 systems away. A dragonkin elder named Vishara watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her scaled face, because she had thought her people were finished, scattered and broken and waiting to fade away. But here was a human cradling 2 hatchlings like they were the most precious things in the universe. "We go to him," she said to her crew on a mining station at the edge of Kavati space. A group of refugees who had lost their own children to syndicate raids saw the message and looked at each other. And something that had been dead in their eyes for a long time flickered back to life. "We go to him," they said, a dozen worlds. In 100 ships, beings who had spent years living in fear made the same choice. Because there is something powerful about watching someone stand up when everyone tells them they should stay down. The syndicate saw the broadcast to Commander Thresh of the syndicate fleet watched it in his quarters aboard the dreadnought Silence. And his pale face twisted with rage as the human finished speaking. "One ship," he said to his officers. "One pathetic human salvage vessel thinks it can challenge us. So we will crush them and broadcast that instead. And the galaxy will remember why they fear us." He assembled a fleet of 30 warships, enough firepower to destroy a small moon, and set course for Waystation Theta-7. Marcus knew they were coming. The station sensors picked up the fleet while it was still hours away, and the controller's voice shook when she contacted him. "Commander Cole, you need to leave now, because they are coming with everything they have." Marcus stood on his bridge with Lyra wrapped around his shoulders and Kale nestled in the crook of his arm, and he looked out at the stars and felt strangely calm. "We are not running anymore," he said. "Then you will die," the controller replied, and there was genuine sorrow in her voice. "Maybe," Marcus said, "but not today." He did not know yet what was happening outside his viewport, in the darkness between stars, where ships were converging on his position from every direction. The first to arrive was Vishara's freighter, old and scarred but still flying, and her voice came through the communications channel like a song. "Marcus Cole, you have the gratitude of the Dragonkin remnant, and my ship stands with yours." Before Marcus could respond, another voice joined the channel. "This is Captain Thane of the Free Trader Hopeful, and we lost good people to the Syndicate 10 years ago, and we are with you." Then another voice, and another. Marcus watched his sensor display with growing disbelief as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace and took position around his battered salvage vessel. Freighters and fighters and personal craft and vessels so old they should not have been flying at all, Commander Cole, Dramac said from the pilot's seat, his voice filled with wonder. "We have 47 ships. 47 ships crewed by humans and Dragonkin and Korvathi and a dozen other species. 47 ships that had nothing in common except that they had all seen his broadcast and decided that this was the line they would draw." Yuki laughed, and there were tears on her face. "You started a revolution with a baby picture," she said. Marcus could not speak for a moment because his throat was too tight. So instead, he just held the twins closer and watched as the ragtag fleet formed up around him. Then the Syndicate arrived. 30 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already powering up, and Commander Thresh's voice cut through every channel like a blade. "This is your one chance. he said. "Surrender the hatchlings, and we will let the rest of you live." Marcus stepped forward, and Lyra lifted her head from his shoulder. And for a moment she looked directly at the viewport, as if she could see the enemy fleet through the endless dark. "You could have stayed hidden in the shadows," Marcus broadcast back. "You could have kept doing your terrible work where nobody looked too closely, but you got greedy, you got cruel, and you made the one mistake no tyrant should ever make." He paused. "You gave us something to fight for." Thresh's response was to open fire. The Battle of Theta 7 lasted 6 hours. It should have been a massacre, because the Syndicate ships were bigger and better armed, and their crews were trained killers. But they had never fought an enemy like this before. They had never fought hope. The ragtag fleet moved like a single organism, covering each other, sacrificing positioning to protect damaged allies, refusing to break no matter how hard they were hit. And at the center of it all was Marcus's ship with its precious cargo. Dramak flew like he had never flown before, his 4 hands dancing across the controls, weaving through weapons fire that should have been impossible to avoid. Yuki kept the shields running on willpower alone, rerouting power from systems they did not need, keeping them alive minute by minute. And Marcus stood on the bridge with the twins, because he would not leave them, not for anything. And Lyra and Kale watched the battle through the viewport with ancient eyes that seemed to understand exactly what was happening. 3 hours in, the Syndicate lost their first capital ship when a Dragonkin elder rammed her freighter into its engine core. 4 hours in, a group of cowardly pacifists who had sworn off violence proved that there are some things worth breaking vows for. 5 hours in, Commander Thresh realized he was losing. He tried to retreat. The fleet did not let him win. The silence finally broke apart under concentrated fire from 20 different ships. Marcus broadcast one final message to the surviving Syndicate vessels. "Go home," he said. "Tell everyone what happened here. And tell them this is what the galaxy looks like when it stops being afraid." The survivors fled on 47 ships. Beings of a dozen different species cheered and cried and held each other, because they had done something impossible. They had stood together against darkness and won on Marcus's bridge. Lyra climbed up to his face and pressed her small snout against his cheek. And Kale made a sound that was almost like purring. "We did it," Yuki whispered. Marcus shook his head. "We started it," he said, looking out at the fleet that had formed around 2 small dragons. "This is just the beginning." He was right. The Battle of Theta 7 was broadcast across the galaxy, and the images of that ragtag fleet standing against impossible odds became symbols of something new, something that had not existed before for the first time in living memory. The scattered peoples of the galaxy had a reason to believe they could fight back, and at the center of it all, cradled in the arms of a tired human salvage commander, 2 Dragonkin hatchlings slept peacefully. They were safe, for now. 10 years changed everything. Lyra stood before the Galactic Council in her formal robes, her violet scales gleaming under the chamber lights, and she spoke with a voice that carried the authority of ancient Dragonkin bloodlines and the warmth of a human upbringing. "We are not asking for charity," she said to the assembled representatives. "We are offering partnership, a chance to build something that has never existed before. A galaxy where species do not just tolerate each other, but lift each other up." She was beautiful and brilliant and fierce, and she had learned all of it from watching her father navigate impossible situations with nothing but stubbornness and heart. The council voted in favor of the Concord Treaty by a margin that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. 3 systems away, her brother Kale led a squad of Sentinel Corps peacekeepers through the ruins of a settlement that had been attacked by what remained of the Syndicate's forces. He was larger now, his golden scales darkened by years of service, and he moved with the deadly grace of someone who had trained with the best fighters from a dozen different worlds. "Survivors here," one of his team called out. And Kale was there in an instant, clearing debris with his powerful claws. Pulling a family from the wreckage, the children stared up at him with wide eyes, and he knew what they were seeing. A dragonkin in human-designed armor working alongside humans and Kovati and others. Something that would have been impossible before the Battle of Theta 7. "You are safe now," he told them. And he meant it. This was the galaxy Marcus Cole had helped build the Sentinel cores, patrolled the shipping lanes that had once been hunting grounds for slavers. Mixed species crews working together to protect the vulnerable. The dragonkin. Remnant had come out of hiding and established new colonies. No longer scattered survivors, but a people rebuilding with OIs at their side, orphanages, and schools had sprung up on a dozen worlds. Places where children of any species could find safety and education and the chance to become something. And at the center of it all was Marcus. He was gray now. More gray than not, and his body ached in ways it never had before. But his eyes still held that same fire that had made him open a pod in a dead ship. 10 years ago, he spent most of his time at the original school they had built on Theta Station, teaching young ones of every species about history and literature and the importance of standing up when the universe pushed you down. The children adored him. They called him grandfather. All of them, regardless of their species, and he called them his little ones. And every night he told them stories about the early days. About a violet hatchling who refused to eat and a gold one with ancient eyes. About a crew who became a family. About a battle that changed everything. Lyra and Kale visited whenever they could. They would sit with him in his small quarters and share meals and tell him about their work. And Marcus would listen with pride so deep it hurt. "You did this," Lyra told him once, gesturing at a viewport that showed ships of 20 different species moving in peaceful cooperation. "All of this started because you opened the pod." Marcus shook his head. "All of this started because 2 small dragons tugged at my coat," he said. "I just did what anyone would do." But that was not true. And they all knew it. Not anyone would have done what Marcus did. That was what made him special to Concord. Summit was supposed to be a celebration. Representatives from every member world gathered on Theta Station to formalize the new galactic order, to sign treaties and make speeches and toast to a future that finally seemed bright. Marcus was there as an honored guest, seated in the front row with other founders of the movement. And he watched with quiet joy as Lyra took the stage to deliver the opening address. 10 years ago, she began. A human man found 2 orphaned hatchlings in the wreckage of everything they had ever known. She smiled at her father. He did not see aliens or burdens or problems to be solved. He saw children who needed help, and he helped them. And in doing so, he showed the galaxy what was possible. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks and did not bother to wipe them away. He never saw the attack coming. No one did. The Syndicate had spent 10 years in the shadows, rebuilding, planning, nursing their humiliation into something sharp and patient. And they had developed new weapons, cloaking technology that could hide ships from any sensor. And they had formed new alliances with those who resented the changes sweeping the galaxy. They struck at the moment of greatest hope. The ceiling of the Great Hall exploded inward as Syndicate forces breached the station. And in the chaos that followed, hundreds of delegates scrambled for cover, while security forces tried desperately to respond. Marcus did not run. He moved toward the stage where Lyra stood frozen in shock, because his daughter was in danger and nothing else mattered. And he was halfway there when the blast hit him. The force of it threw him across the room. He landed hard and felt things break inside him. And when he tried to get up, his body refused to cooperate. And he realized with strange calmness that this was it. This was how it ended. "Father," Lyra screamed. Fighting through the crowd to reach him, Marcus managed to turn his head. And he saw her coming, her violet scales bright even in the smoke and chaos. And behind her he saw Kale riding with his squad. golden scales dark with soot. My children. He whispered. Lyra reached him first and fell to her knees beside him, and her hands pressed against his wounds as if she could hold him together by will alone. Do not leave us, she begged. Please do not leave us. Marcus reached up with a hand that shook and touched her face. You are going to be okay, he said. Both of you. You are going to be so much more than okay. You are going to change everything. Cale was there now, his ancient eyes wet with tears. And Marcus reached for him too. Take care of each other, Marcus said. Take care of all of them. Every lost child, every broken thing. That is your inheritance. That is what I leave you. Father, Cale said. And his voice broke on the word. Marcus smiled. I found you in the wreckage, he said. Best thing I ever did. Best decision I ever made. And I would do it again, 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. His eyes began to close. Carry on, he whispered. Promise me. We promise, Lyra said. We promise, Cale said. Marcus Cole, commander and salvager and father, died with his children holding his hands around them. The battle raged on. But in that small circle of grief, there was only silence. Only love. Only the weight of a legacy that would outlast empires. The galaxy expected vengeance. It was the Dragonkin way. Everyone knew that. Fire and fury and destruction rained upon those who had wronged them. And the Syndicate had taken something precious. So surely the response would be terrible. Lyra stood in the ruins of the Great Hall 3 days after the attack, her violet scales dull with grief and ash. And she looked out at the gathered representatives who had come to hear what the Tirwotapes. Dragons would demand. They expected war. They expected blood. They did not expect what she gave them. My father found us in the wreckage of everything we knew, she said. And her voice was steady even though her heart was shattered. He was a stranger, and we were afraid, and the smart thing, the logical thing, would have been to walk away and let us die with our people. She paused and looked at Cale, who stood beside her with his golden scales still marked by the battle that had taken their father. But humans are not logical, she continued. They love too easily and hope too fiercely, and they look at broken things and see something worth saving. And that is what he did. He looked at 2 terrified hatchlings and decided we were worth saving. The chamber was silent. The Syndicate believes they have won, Lyra said. They believe that killing Marcus Cole has broken us. That we will lash out in rage and prove that we are no better than they are. That violence is the only language the galaxy truly speaks. Her eyes swept across the assembled delegates. They are wrong. Cale stepped forward, and when he spoke his voice carried the authority of a warrior and the gentleness of someone who had been raised by the kindest man in the galaxy. Our father taught us that. You do not defeat cruelty with cruelty, he said. You defeat it by refusing to stop caring, by being irrational enough to believe that the galaxy can be better, by picking up every broken thing you find and carrying it forward. He looked at his sister, and she nodded. We will not burn the Syndicate to ash, Lyra said. We will not hunt them down and destroy them, because that is not what he would have wanted. That is not what he taught us. She raised her chin. Instead, we will build. We will build schools and hospitals and shelters on every world that needs them. We will create a network of protection for every orphan child, regardless of species. We will make the galaxy so full of hope and connection that there is no room left for those who profit from suffering. We will do what he did, Cale added. We will cradle the young and carry on. The chamber updid. Some shouted that it was not enough, that the Syndicate needed to be punished. That mercy was weakness. But others were crying, and more were standing. And something shifted in the room. Something that felt like the beginning of a new age. The Concord did not collapse after the attack. It grew stronger. Word spread of the Dragon Twins who chose building over burning. and beings across the galaxy who had been waiting for an excuse to give up found instead a reason to keep trying. The Cole Institute was founded within a month. It started as a single orphanage on Theta Station, built on the site where Marcus had died. But it grew quickly as donations poured in from every corner of civilized space. Within a year, there were coal houses on 12 worlds. Within 5 years, there were hundreds. Lyra led the diplomatic efforts, traveling constantly, speaking to governments and councils and anyone who would listen, spreading the message her father had lived. Every child matters, she would say. Every species has value, and we are stronger together than we ever were apart. Kale led the Sentinel Corps through a transformation that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier, turning them from a peacekeeping force into something more. A family of warriors dedicated not just to protecting the innocent, but to healing the broken. He personally visited every coal house at least once a year, and the children there knew him as Uncle Kale, the Golden Dragon who told the best stories and always had time to listen. The Syndicate did not fall in battle. They fell in irrelevance as the galaxy grew more connected. As trade routes became safer and orphanages became commonplace, and the children of 100 species grew up together, the market for slaves and suffering simply dried up within 15 years. The Syndicate was nothing but a memory, a cautionary tale told to young ones about what happens when you build your empire on cruelty. The last Syndicate stronghold surrendered without a fight, its leaders begging for mercy from the same galaxy they had terrorized for generations. Lyra was there for the surrender. She looked at the beings who had ordered her people slaughtered, who had sent the assassins that killed her father, and she felt the old rage rise up in her chest. But then she remembered his hands on her face as he died, remembered his last words, and the rage faded into something else. "You will face justice," she told them, "but you will live." Because that is what he would have wanted. 50 years after the Battle of Theta 7, the galaxy gathered again for a celebration. This time, there was no attack, no tragedy, only joy, as representatives from every species came together to honor the anniversary of the Concord Treaty and the memory of the man who had made it all possible. The original Theta Station had been rebuilt around a massive central plaza, and at its heart stood a statue that had become the most recognized symbol in the galaxy. It depicted a tired human man in a worn salvage jacket, and in his arms he carried 2 small dragons, one violet and one gold, and his face held an expression of fierce determination and infinite tenderness. The plaque at its base was simply, she could have walked away. He didn't note. Leela and Kale stood before the statue, both of them old now by dragonkin standards. Their scales faded, but their eyes still bright. "Do you think he would be proud?" Kale asked. Lyra smiled. "He was always proud of us," she said. "From the first moment, even when we were terrified hatchlings who could not even feed ourselves. He was proud." She reached out and touched the statue's hand. "But yes, I think he would be proud of this too." Around them the plaza filled with children of every species, playing together, laughing together, wearing the colors of the Cole Institute. And each one of them carried the legacy of a single choice made 50 years ago in the wreckage of a dead ship. One human decided to care. That was all it took. One human decided that 2 small lives were worth protecting. And from that decision grew a movement that changed the galaxy, that proved the cynics wrong, that showed everyone watching that hope was not naive, and love was not weakness. Lyra addressed the crowd one final time. "My father was not a great warrior or a brilliant scientist or a powerful politician," she said. "He was a salvage operator with a battered ship and a stubborn heart. And when he found 2 orphans who needed help, he did not calculate the odds or consider the risks." She looked at Kale. "He just opened the pod." Kale nodded. "The galaxy told him it was impossible," he said. "Told him he could not fight the Syndicate, could not raise dragonkin children, could not change anything. And he listened to all of that, and then he did it anyway. That is what humans do, Lyra said. That is what he taught us. That is what we have tried to teach everyone else. She spread her wings, violet scales catching the light. You do not have to be powerful to make a difference, she said. You do not have to be special or chosen or destined for greatness. You just have to decide that something matters and refuse to give up on it. You just have to cradle the young, Kale said, and carry on. Lyra finished. The crowd cheered. And somewhere in the stars above them, in whatever place good souls go when their work is done, a tired old salvage commander smiled. His children had turned out okay, better than okay. They had turned out extraordinary, and it had all started with a tug on his coat.